Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2021 BMW Data Dive show. Apologies for jumping on late. My baseball game went a lot longer than I had thought, but nevertheless, here we are. We got a lot to get into since Fantasy National updated the stuff for today, or for this weekend. They updated it today. As always, the usual reminders. Follow me on social media. I said that I would be a little bit later tonight, and I mentioned yesterday that it would be moved to today or tonight, the Data Dive show, that is, so Fantasy National could get their statistics in due to the weather for the Northern Trust being delayed a day. Chat's open. Interact. Make fun of my bets from last week. What are you thinking for the BMW? What's your initial lean? What bets have you made? Because I've made one already. So just jump in. What do you want to see tonight in the data? And last but not least, as always, statistics provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. It's going to make you a lot better gambler, a lot better DFS player. So a lot to get into. Let's dig into the data for the BMW. I'm going to start with the tournament fact sheet here for the BMW. And as you can see, we are at Caves Valley Golf Club in Owings Mills, Maryland, which is a suburb of Baltimore. It's a par 72, 7,500 plus yards. The average green size is 5,200 square feet, which is a bit smaller, a little bit smaller than tour average, but not by much. A lot of rough, 120 acres of rough, only 28 acres of fairway. Seven water hazards come into play on 5 holes. We are on bent grass again, and they're going to be fast. Bent grass throughout, and the rough is tall fescue and bluegrass. A couple of things to note about the course. New championship tees were built, extended the length. Landing areas have been tightened to approximately 25 yards in width. That's pretty narrow. So accuracy is going to be very key. And you'll see in my initial data model how I've factored that in. And then the number of bunkers has been reduced while the square footage of bunker spaces remained the same. So the bunkers that they did leave in, they expanded and then took out some others. And as we went through the initial research show on Sunday, went through a hole by hole, since this course has not been a part of the PGA Tour. It was a good indicator, or a good look at perhaps what could play well here at Caves Valley. Let me make sure I've got chat open. As always, guys, chat is up and running. So, looking at this tournament fact sheet, it kind of struck me as similar to last week. So let's take a look here. So you got, I did not mean to drag that out separately. So here's the Northern Trust, 7,410. This is 7,542. So essentially what they've done is added some yards and made it a par 5 here at Caves Valley. So it's a similar length course. Sorry, I cannot talk tonight. Similar length course. So par 71, 7410, par 72, 7542. But at the Northern Trust, you had small greens. Acres of fairway were about the same, but notice the rough. Only 70 acres of rough. So 4,600, 2,370. You got a little bit bigger greens, but not by much. 5,200. 28, slightly more acres of fairway, but almost double the acres of rough. So that tells me that scrambling is going to be pretty important. If people are not finding the fairway, they're going to have to scramble. So I'm going to be paying close attention to scrambling in my data models. There were 13 water hazards that came into play on 12 holes last week, 7 and 5, so fairly similar. And then last week at the Northern Trust, you had bent grass all the way around, and the secondary was 3 inches. Well, You've got tall fescue, ryegrass, and bluegrass, the same length, 3 inches. These are going to be cut a little bit higher, so maybe not as fast, but still fast. And then the fairways are at 0.4, 0.375. So very, very, very similar layout as far as course statistics from last week. So with that, I'm going to bring up, I'm going to switch views here for a second. Give me one moment as I bring up what happened last week and what we looked at for the Northern Trust. Now, DFS-wise, it was pretty successful. Outright betting, not so much. But remember, because we had seen this course in 2019, we kind of had a little bit of an idea what to look at. So we had strokes gained approach at 15% for the last 36. We looked at par fours. We looked at par fours of the length. We saw that the proximities that mainly came into play were from 175 to 200 and a little bit less of 200. You had the 450 par fours, and then of course you're putting and you're around the green. And Paul Casey, even though he did not win, he didn't have the greatest of tournaments. He actually lost 5.5 strokes putting. That didn't help his cause, so he would have been a lot better. I was a little off on Tony Finau. That was not a good call for me, as he ended up winning. But I felt pretty good about the reasoning behind most of these picks. Spieth fell off. I mean, he cratered on Monday. Hoffman was T21. Pretty good value there. Matt Wallace withdrew. That sucked. Matsuyama played well. JT obviously was up there for the longest time. Rahm, obviously. Morikawa, who missed the cut, had an undisclosed back injury. Rory answer. So there was success and failure here. And we're going to take a look at what worked and what didn't here in a bit. But this will just give you an idea of what we looked at on a similar style course just last week. The difference is this week, this course is completely unknown. It's never been used on the PGA Tour. So I'm going to exit out of these two. I'm going to bring up the templates from the Pro Visualizer. And again, this is only estimations based on what Pro Visualizer is saying. I have no idea if these are going to work when we change to the proximity. But this is at least the whole distribution chart that Fantasy National has. There are 3 par 3s of this length and 1 long one. There are 3 very short par 5s, drivable. 1 medium length and 6 that are long, 450 to 500. And then all the par 5s fall in this range, 550 to 600. All of them are from 580 to 600, so some of those days, those par 5s are going to leak into this category, but they're all in the upper end of the 550 to 600. So what this tells me is that I'm going to look at this area for par 3s, and I'm actually going to look at 225 plus, because 2 of these par 3s are right on the edge of that. It's a 223. I think one might be 219. So they will be close to the 225 threshold on a day or two. So I'm just going to look at long par 3s, who does well on those. I'm also going to look at who does well on the 450, just like last week. But I'm also going to add a little bit of data into these drivable par 4s. Who makes hay on drivable par 4s? Let's see if guys can sneak away with some eagles and such. And of course, I'm going to look at par 5s of this range here, since all 4 par 5s fall in this. So that's based on scorecard. Here's the whole distribution chart that Fantasy National has or makes. And then this is, again, just the estimated proximities from Pro Visualizer. You had 2 holes that estimated from 75 to 100, 2 more from 100 to 125. Majority came from 150 to 175, with a few more. 2 of these are the par 5. So if guys have to lay up, they move into this category. So be aware of that. These are including 2 potential 3-shot par 5s. So I'm going to mainly look at this proximity when I'm building some data models. Because this course has never been played, we are going to stick to more, what I'll say, overhead statistics, such as off the tee, approach, as opposed to really digging into the proximities and such. I want to see a little bit, but certainly not to the level that we did on the Northern Trust. So I wanted to show you these 2 Excel files here, the scorecard and the proximity estimations from what Fantasy National normally does, and the what we looked at for the Northern Trust. And I'm going to keep these up in the background just in case, but I'm going to go ahead and switch to my web page view and bring up Fantasy National. And you can see here, there were my the results of my base model earlier, but this is what I had originally set up. It was 5% off the tee. I'm sorry, I keep looking over just to make sure bring up chat so I don't miss anyone's comments. 5% off the tee, 20% approach, and I generally set approach very high on unknown courses. That's just my default. I prefer iron play as opposed to putting. 5 around the green, 5 for putting. I want to see who gives themselves opportunities. I want to see who avoids bogeys. Because the fairways are so narrow, I'm going to place a premium on accuracy, and I don't know if that's correct or not. But I'm going to place a premium on accuracy, and I'm going to place a premium on scrambling because of the fescue, the amount of rough that is prevalent on this course. I mentioned I was going to take a look at the long par 3s. I took a little bit of a look on the drivable par 4s or short par 4s. As well as the 450 500s, and 6 of the 10 par 4s fall in this length. All the par 5s fall in this length, so I added 10%. I made that 10% instead of 5, since all par 5s fall in this range. And then I did a couple of proximities. I did the 150 to 175, and then I did 200 plus in case guys are not laying up. They're going for the green and 2 on those par 5s. So this was just my first initial run through earlier today. Certainly not married to this, and at the end of the show I'm going to try to build a mixed condition data model for you all. But this is just my first initial thoughts, and if you're live in chat, let me know what you're thinking. Or if you're a Fantasy National member, what have you run, and what results are you getting? I'm going to let this give it time to sort itself out, because it tends to skip. But based on the base model, using the percentages I just showed you, Louis Oosthuizen's my number 1, followed by Morikawa, Rahm, English, and Cantlay are my top 5. And this is, of course, for the last 24 rounds. I default to 24 rounds. Henley, Hovland, Answer, Cam Smith, and Sungjae M round out the top 10, with Berger and Matsuyama and Casey all lurking right outside the top 10. So a little bit of a surprise, I suppose. But for example, Morikawa just doesn't seem like he plays long courses very well. It doesn't seem like he plays difficult courses well, and we don't know if this is going to be difficult or not. As you can see, he just had a terrible Northern Trust. His putting's never been great, but even his approach was negative, and he's never. Look how long it had to be until he was. Oddly enough, the last time he was negative in iron play was at last year's Northern Trust. He had gained strokes in every single tournament for approach of ones that are charted. I'm sure he gained at the Open. He probably gained at the Masters. We don't know about the fall because those three places, or I'm sorry, those two. The Open Championship and the Masters are proprietary, so we don't see anything but the strokes gained total. But so he just had a bad tournament last week. Now how much the back affects him, we don't know. And speaking of injuries, there are 69 players in the field this week. And if you know, well, if you realize that BMW is usually top 70, but there's 69 players in the field this week. Patrick Reed is not playing again. And if you know something, let me know, because all I know is he's not playing. I know he withdrew from the Northern Trust, and I know he's withdrawn from the BMW, but I do not know why. I think it's injury. I'm sure it's injury related, but I just don't know. Coming back to the base model here, we have, let's see, Justin Thomas, Rory at 21. Where is the winner of last week? Tony Finau at 34. Take nothing away from Tony Finau. Congratulations on the win. And which reminds me, congratulations to a subscriber of mine, Brandon Barger, had a nice win bet on Tony Finau at 55-1. So congratulations. You made a bet that I absolutely did not. So all the credit to you. And if you make successful bets, please let me know. I want to hear about it. I want to give you credit. I want to shout you out. So yeah, congratulations, Brandon, on a pretty nice hit. But for the Northern Trust last week, Tony Finau played very, very well, but it was a bit of an outlier. He had lost strokes in 4 straight tournaments leading up to that. He's generally not the best putter, although bent is his favorite surface, so that is something. But he's generally very hot and cold, and he just happened to be hot, which is great. But this gaining almost 6 strokes on approach is out of the norm for Tony Finau. He had a very, very hot week with the irons. If we click into here, we're actually going to see, here's the leaderboard, but we can dig into some of this data. So let's look at some strokes gained data here. Off the tee, Hudson Swafford was actually the best off the tee, 7.5. But you see how important off the tee was last week. The lowest player it takes all the way down to what 10, 20, maybe 25 or so until somebody who missed the cut was gaining off the tee in CT Pan. And if you notice, he was awful on the greens, just awful on the greens. So, I mean, he very well could have been making a cut, and then you had some other guys here. So off the tee was very, very important last week. Very, very important. Tony Finau was high. I mean, look at these high finishes. You have an 11th and some middling stuff, but, I mean, Bryson DeChambeau was terrible with his short game. Hideki could not hit an iron and is never very good around the green. Gim. Then you have Corey Connors, who does Corey Connor things. He ball strikes the shit out of it and doesn't hit a putt or a chip. Rahm was generally pretty darn good, except around the green. Scheffler couldn't make a putt. Wise was okay. Sungjae, so yeah, I mentioned last week, Sungjae, I'm starting to get on the bandwagon again for Sungjae until he starts to put it all together. He's starting to put it all together. I kind of like Sungjae this week. You see Tony Finau gained across the board. Sam Burns. So, obviously off the tee was very important. Let's look at approach. And, again, it takes maybe to the top 20 before you see somebody who was positive in strokes and approach that missed the cut. And Sepp Straka was just fucking awful off the tee. Just fucking awful. Wasn't great around the green and was pretty neutral putting. But he struck it well, couldn't get off the tee. So But again, the top 20, including a lot of high finishes. You got Rahm, there's Smith, Lowry, who had an 11th, Connors at 8th, Finau, your winner. Casey, look at Casey. Casey ball struck the shit out of it. He was pretty good off the tee. Could not chip and was Sergio on the green. I mean, he went full Sergio on the green, just putting with his eyes closed. So did Russell Henley. Russell Henley was awful on the greens. So those are two names to perhaps take a look at. Same with Berger. I know I was touting Berger quite a bit last week, and the reasons, I felt confident in the reasons why. He was a little worse off the tee than I would have thought, but he struck it well. He was, mediocre. I mean, negative, but middling in the around the green category. But he just did not make a putt. And Berger is generally not that bad of a putter. I mean, he had gained in 4 straight. He was, generally pretty good. His around the green has never been good, so seeing a negative .7 is about what you expect. He's still ball striking the hell out of it. He's just kind of been a little off with the driver. So if that comes back and these all hold the same, and you get a decent week for putting out of Berger, granted we're on Bent's, it's his least favorite. I still like the odds for Berger, and we'll get into the odds here in a second. But we're going to dig in as much as we can into this Northern Trust, because I really do think this is a good look for the BMW, a good comparison. And you see here, Paul Casey lost the most strokes on the green. Berger was third, most the worst putting for the week. Casey was first, Berger was third. Swafford had a very high finish and couldn't putt. Stop. There we go. Conversely, you had Alex Noren, who just couldn't get off the tee, but was pretty good with his irons, pretty good chipping, and awesome putting. That saved his season because he was on the outside looking in coming into the Northern Trust. Now he's in the BMW. He had Stuart Sink, who didn't play all that great except for putt. Hoagie, Van Rooyen, Cam Davis, Tringali. So you see here how important putting can be, but it's not the only factor. I thought around the green was going to play a pretty good indicator. Turned out to be somewhat important. Richie Wierenski missed the cut. He was great. He was pretty good around the green. Brian Gay. I mean, you had some very high finishes. Naw here does Kevin Naw things, chip and putt. Harry Higgs, Robert Streb. But you'll notice all of these guys were terrible with their irons. Cantley wasn't terrible. He was less than average. But these guys made up for it around the green. That's why they had some fairly high finishes, minus Scott Piercy. You had Lowry. You had Brooks. Spieth was just awful everywhere except around the green. So I don't want to give myself a success for saying around the green was going to be important, but it certainly played a factor. Let's take a look at some of the precise statistics that we kind of looked at last week. We noted I wanted to look at birdies and opportunities gained, but a lot of it bogeys avoided. And this could be obvious, obviously if you're avoiding bogeys, you're going to be at the top of the leaderboard. But you'll notice here, like Siwoo was great at avoiding bogeys, but he didn't give himself a lot of birdies either. He was just parring his way around, and he missed the cut. Whereas, somebody like Xander, who was, just not birdieing at all, but avoided. So he had a lot of pars, and he had a few eagles. I think he was actually leading the field in eagles. No, sorry, Champ, English, Spieth were the leader in eagles. Kyle Stanley second, and then you had a few players that had probably 2 eagles maybe. So bogeys avoided. I do like seeing that statistic just to see, who was avoiding bogeys and making birdies. So obviously Cam Smith, John Rahm, Tony Finau. Xander was a bit of an outlier. Like Martin Laird down here, Luke List, Adam Scott, these guys just didn't give themselves enough birdies because there's no opportunities gained once the tournament starts. It's a preview type statistic. Let's look at par 4 efficiency because we had looked at that, and we had looked a lot at first we had looked at strokes gained par 4. Your winner was the leader on strokes gained par 4. Strab was pretty good. Smith was great. Rory, he had a mediocre finish, but he was great at the par 4s. Hoagie, Thomas. So that statistic, I would say, was a big hit. You had to play the par 4s well last week, as was the case in 2019, and that came through again at the Northern Trust at Liberty National. And then another thing we looked at was the par 4 450 to 500s because the majority of the par 4s were at that length. And again, some pretty high finishes. Fratelli's kind of the outlier here. He did very well on those length of par 4s, but didn't do very well on the others. And then, obviously you got second, third, fourth, first, eighth. So that one I would consider a hit with an outlier of Dylan Fratelli. So that was a pretty big hit. So I feel good for the reasoning of using those par 4 statistics that we took a look at last week. As I switch to Excel view again real quick, we looked at strokes gained par 4. We had 15% there. Again, I would say around the green was hit and miss, I guess. The 450 to 500s absolutely were a hit. I would say absolutely a hit. And if you disagree, please jump in chat. Let me know if you think those weren't the best things to look at. Approach was pretty good. Now let's take a look at the proximities. So the par 4s did well. Let's look at the proximities. And again, the only reason I'm going this much in depth on the Northern Trust is there are a lot of similarities between Liberty National and Caves Valley. So let's look at the 175 to 200 because that was the main factor, at least coming in 2019. It was 175 to 200, and it's kind of pretty hit and miss, actually. I mean, Finau was a bit negative, but overall that's negligible. Cam Smith, a little bit worse. Hoagie was not good. Rahm was fantastic. But, you look in the top 20 here, it's a mixed bag. It really is a mixed bag. So I would say that was not a successful statistic to measure. Actually, it became the 150 to 175. If you were positive in that, that was more of an indication of success here. And that just didn't play out at all, really, in any of the 2019 data that we looked at. So guys were either driving it further or the course didn't play as long. So, I can't say that looking at the 175 to 200 was a success. The 200, kind of hit and miss. I only put 5% on it last week since the course was long. So if guys were laying back off the tee, they were going to leave themselves obviously more distance to come in. So I did want to look at 200 plus, and it's kind of a mixed bag. But I put a lot more stock into the 175 to 200, and it was a mixed bag. So I don't think that was a success. I really don't. Putting, I think we pretty much kind of looked at, but Paul Casey terrible, Berger terrible. Two people I was pretty high on, and they played well minus that statistic. So it happens. You have weeks like that. In fact, I'm just gonna sort by this. Like Paul Casey, great off the tee, fantastic with his irons, couldn't chip or couldn't putt. Berger, we looked a little bit more in depth. Couldn't putt. He's never been good around the green. Still ball striking the shit out of it. His tee game is a little bit wary, is a little bit down now. But so there was a look at the Northern Trust and the data that worked and didn't work. So that's important as we go into the BMW. Or at least I think it's going to be important because there's no course history here. It is a long course. It's 7,500 plus yards. So when we come back to this base model, I'm going to filter this first on long courses. I'm going to filter this on long courses. I'm just going to use the same percentages for all the statistics, see what this spits out. And you'll see here, Justin Thomas is actually number 1. I'm going to give it a second to finish doing all this because sometimes it wants to skip. On long courses with these statistical percentages, Justin Thomas rises to number 1. You have Xander 2nd, Connors 3rd, Rory 4th, and Answer 5th. Brooks, Paul Casey, Keegan Bradley, Cantley, and Lucas Glover round out the top 10. And not to spoil anything, but obviously they have the Draftkings pricing out, so there's a name to look at perhaps tomorrow for the DFS tactics in Lucas Glover. Very cheap, but coming into this on long courses, you got Justin Thomas, who is first around the green, second in opportunities. He's the best in the field at the length of the par fives. He's great at the proximities. Not much to not like there. I've actually been really keying in on Rory this week, and let me show you why. Rory, he doesn't putt well on bent, and he's not having a great time with the putting. But I want you to notice here with his Northern Trust, his tee to green game is generally on fire. It's generally his strength. He gained 2 off the tee, which is a little bit below average for Rory, but certainly within his realm. He is never this bad of a ball striker. It is very rare that he is this bad of a ball striker. He lost almost 4 strokes with his irons. I mean, historically, he has been one of the best iron players, strokes gained approach, on the tour. So I think this was a bit of an outlier. I think it's an outlier, not a bit. I think it is a complete outlier. I think he's being completely undervalued this week. He opened up on DraftKings Sportsbook at 35-1. As soon as I saw that, I hammered it. I hammered Rory at 35-1. I figured his odds would drop, and looking here, they're down to 25-1. So he's dropped 10 points in 30 hours. So I jumped on that 35 as quickly as possible. So I hope you did too, but it's still not too late. 25-1 I still think is fair value for Rory. Now certainly the putting is not going to always be this high. It's very erratic. I mean, he lost 3.5 there, he lost 2, lost 3, but he's also gained 3.5, gained 7, gained 4. So he's very volatile with the putter. If he has another week like he did with the putter, which obviously is not a guarantee, but if he does, and his irons come back to not even typical Rory, just medium, he's gonna have a Rory type finish that you would expect from one of the best players in the world. So I hammered Rory at 35-1. So I just wanted to highlight that. Get off there. Let's take a look at, because I know these are going to be bent greens, let's take a look at bent greens. And we'll expand that out to the last 36 rounds. I'm going to get off the custom model. Just go strokes gained. Let's get it out to the last 36. Removed the over 7,400. Let's just look at bent greens. And we're going to go fast because I'm pretty confident these are going to be fast bent greens. In the last 36 rounds, your best putters on fast bent greens: Kevin Na, Kisner, English, Webb Simpson, Jordan Spieth are your top 5, followed by Jones, Xander, Desham, Horschel, and Alex Noren. And Noren's is propped up by last week's just in Fuego round, or in Fuego tournament with the putter. So, there are your best putters on fast bent greens in the last 36 rounds. If we want to narrow that in, let's just take a look at the last 12. Who's really hot with the putter lately on fast bent greens? That would be still Kevin Na, doing Kevin Na things. He's a good putter. English, Cam Smith, Horschel, and Deschamps. Jones, Spieth, Kisner, Simpson, and Cantlay round out the top 10 with Noren 11. So quite a bit of an overlap there. So generally, the better putters short are better putters overall, with a few exceptions. You saw Bryson. He jumped up quite a bit. Kisner dropped a little bit. Cam Smith rose. So there's a look at your good baseline putters and your very hot with the putters now. Let's remove those filters. Let's take a look at long courses just on a strokes gained basis. Go back to our base of 24. Your strokes gained total leader on long courses is Justin Thomas, then Rory, Brooks Koepka, Rahm, and Schauffele are your top 5. Grillo is 6th. DJ, Hovland, Cantlay, and Spieth round out the top 10. With that being said, I do want to take a look at off the tee a little bit, but it's more going to be fairways, and we'll dig into that here in a second. But off the tee on long courses, should be no surprise, Cameron Champ is the leader, just due to sheer length. I'm a little surprised it's Deschamps. It's Champ over Deschamps, because I thought Deschamps would be first, Champ second, but Deschamps actually third. Johnny Vegas, somebody who I was really touting last week. I really thought he was going to, that tournament set up well for him, just didn't work out. Again, a bit of an outlier. He's generally very good off the tee. He just wasn't. Had an off week with the driver. His irons were okay. He had been very hot lately with the irons. Mediocre around the green, and lost more than he generally does with the putting. It was just a bad week. I feel good about the reasoning behind picking Vegas. It just didn't work out. Having said that, Vegas is somebody else I'm kind of looking at this week, because he's still in good form, minus this Northern Trust. He generally doesn't miss, he generally doesn't lose strokes off the tee. So, look here, he had a 15th, gained 3, second at the 3M, gained 2.5. At the Palmetto, he gained 7.5, second. So, his off the tee game is his strength, and he was negative last week and missed the cut. So, that returns to form. I like Johnny Vegas. But those are your leaders on long courses off the tee. Right there. Champ, Vegas, Deschamps, Rahm, and Rory, with Connors, Koepka, Xander, Keith Mitchell, and Kevin Streelman rounding out the top 10. But on long courses, I want to look at who hits fairways. Who hits fairways on these long courses, because I think that's going to be a big factor this week. So fairways gained on long courses. Corey Connors is number 1. Kevin Streelman 2. Sung Jae 3. Answer 4. And Russell Henley 5. Morikawa, Harman, Kisner, Horschel, and Louis Oosthuizen round out the top 10. So, some things to kind of note there. Streelman has now popped on off the tee, and a lot of that's obviously because of the fairways. You have to come down to Keegan Bradley before you get a fairway plus a decent distance. As you see here, most of these fairway guys are very short off the tee, at least in comparison to this field. John Rahm is fantastic. Well, I shouldn't say fantastic. He's very good at both. You have Johnny Vegas, who's very good at both. So again, I think Johnny Vegas is being a little bit undervalued. You've got Sam Burns at 7 and 26, Kokrak at 13 and 27. So I always like to come here and look at, if I think off the tee is going to be a factor, and I think it is, especially fairways, who are guys that hit fairways and still drive it a decent distance. Because again, this course is long. So just because you're hitting fairways, it is not going to not going to matter if you're only hitting it, 250, 260. PY, absolutely, bud. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you tuning in. What are you wanting to see? What's your initial lean so far for the BMW? But again, I like seeing that if I think off the tee is a factor. I also want to see scrambling. And now, granted, you have scrambling on these long courses still filtered. But the number one scrambler in the field on long courses is Leishman, then Schwartzel, Rory, Spieth, and Harmon, followed by Cantley, Tringali, Xander, Taylor Gooch, and Kevin Na. So Kevin Na, all the short game prowess right there. There's another reason why I like Rory this week. He's got the off the tee metrics, and he's very good at scrambling, very good at sand saves, great at greens and regulation. Rory's popping on a lot of models. So I really like Rory this week, which obviously means you should avoid him at all costs, especially after the week I had at the Northern Trust. But let's take a look at, because we don't know how easy or difficult this course is going to play. Again, it's the first time it's being used on the PGA Tour, so I'm going to avoid anything with scoring relative to par. We just don't know. Don't know anything about hitting fairways, although I imagine it's more on the difficult level, but I don't know. I would tend to think rough length will be long, but again, I don't know. I am very confident it's going to be fast. We know it's par 72, and we know it's long. Speaking to that, the only other filter that we could maybe apply is the wind. The Architect, as I mentioned on the initial research show, it's a Tom Fazio design, so obviously no help there in the Architect. But let's take a look at the wind, and yes, it's still 48 hours or 36 hours until it's the tournament's played. I'm going to refresh this because I haven't reloaded it since coming back from the baseball game. But we can see here at least Thursday and Friday, just perfect golf weather. Perfect golf weather. I mean, no gusts above 10. The highest sustain is 6. I mean, this is it's a non-factor, a complete non-factor as of right now. Now, obviously, tune in tomorrow where I'll look at the weather right before the end of the show, and it could change. But right now, does not look like wind's going to be a factor. Now, having said that, the weekend it looks like it could pick up. You got some rain in the forecast, it looks like, especially overnight into Thursday and overnight Friday into Saturday. But, wind's not a factor. So if anything, and I don't know if it's going to stay this way, I'm going to log off or exit out of the wind finder. Because of that, I might start using some calm wind filters. If it's going to stay like that, I might use some calm wind filters. I just don't know yet. So I'll probably do that tomorrow if the forecast stays relatively the same. But anyway, so there's the off the tee. Like showing the scrambling and such. Let's take a look at the efficiencies. I'm a little wary on proximity. As we went through the Northern Trust, we thought, at least I thought it was going to be 175 to 200. It ended up being 150 to 175. So if the Pro Visualizer is correct, we're going to be wanting the 150 to 175 and the 200, but we just don't know. We just don't know because the course hasn't been played. So I'm a little wary on using the proximities. So I'm not going to go into that. Let's look at the efficiencies. Let's go into the par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s. The par 3s, I'm going to filter on this. Now, 3 of the 4 do fall in this range. So be aware of that. But the reason I'm focusing on this one is that 2 of the par 3s are 219 and 223 or so. So very easily could be pushed into this range. So I'm just going to look at long par 3s because generally speaking, these are long par 3s. So let me make sure I remove all the filters. No filters there. No filters there. No filters there. All right, so just in the past 24 rounds, who is the best at these long par threes? Maverick McNeely, Scotty Scheffler, Colin Morikawa, DJ, and Tom Hoagie are your top 5 on these long par threes. Followed by Hughes, Tringali, Noren, Connors, and English at the top 10. It's interesting to see English is actually first in the actual yardage on the scorecard, 10th and long. DJ, 5th and 4th. So there's someone, those are two to look at if you want to focus on par 3 scoring for this week. If you think guys are going to make their hay on par 3s. Someone else, Answer. Sorry, let me scroll down for you. Answer, 2nd in the actual length, 21st on long par 3s. Let's see who's not very good. Not very good. You've got Joaquin Niemann here, 54 and 59. Horschel, 48.62. Horschel, 69th. So worst at, why is that all messed up? At the par 3, 220 to 225, and 63rd at par 3s of the longest length. So some names to be wary of if you're focusing on par 3s. Let's move into par 4s. Again, I'm going to look now. Yes, the par 4s actually fall into this category, the 350 to 400, but because they're drivable, I want to look at this because this generally denotes the drivable par 4s. The reason that this course has this length of drivable par 4s is it accounts for the dog legs. There is a couple of holes that are almost 90-degree dog legs that if you want to tackle, if you're willing to risk bunkers and deep rough and so on, and you want to try to drive the green, you can absolutely cut the dog leg and it turns into maybe say like a 328-yard drive as opposed to a hole playing 362. So I'm going to focus on these drivable par 4s first. Who are the best at the drivable par 4s? Cameron Davis, Victor Hovland, Robert Streb, Rory, and Mark Leishman are the top 5 in drivable par 4s. Cam Smith, Harris English, Jason Kokrak, Johnny Vegas, and Aaron Wise round out the top 10. On the other end of the spectrum, Xander is actually is the worst in the field at drivable par 4s. Munoz, Casey, Henley, Kisner, Kirk, EVR, Palmer, and Herman. Interesting stuff. You wouldn't think an elite player like Xander would be the worst in the field at drivable par 4s, but he is. The data says he is. Again, a couple of things to highlight here. Rory, again, popping in a lot of models, high in a lot of models. Johnny Vegas. And this should be no surprise with this being a driver statistic. Again, let's take a look at the 450 to 500 since 6 of the 10 par 4s are of this length. Rory and JT number 1, Louis 3rd, Morikawa 4th, John Rahm 5th. Finau, Cantley, Grace, Kirk, and Homa round out the top 10. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have Sergio, who is pretty good at all the other par 4s except this length. So he is terrible. And Mickelson, Champ, Leishman, Kazire, Horschel, Harold Varner, Lucas Glover, and Siwoo Kim. There is your bottom 10 of par 4 lengths. Some good stuff there. And then let's look at par 5s. And again, I'm going to solely focus on this right here. All the par 4s fall in this range, and they're all between 580 and 600. Now, some days, some will play into the 600, sure. But all 4 fall into this range. So I definitely want to see who plays this length of par 5 well. Scotty Scheffler is your number 1. Desham, Swafford, Gooch, and Eric Van Rooyen are your top 5. So Van Rooyen, bad at the par 4s, good at the par 5s. Neiman, bad at the par 3s, good at the par 5s. Neiman 6, Morikawa 7, Horschel, Spieth, and Berger and Tringali are tied for 10. Berger and Tringali tied for 10. So good stuff there. Vegas lurks at 15th. Rory actually is not high on this list of this length of par 5. So this is the first statistic that I've been looking at that he doesn't show up high on the statistics or the leaderboard. Coming down and looking at who's the worst at this length of par 5s, Kisner's the worst, then Varner, Chant, Streb, and Jones, Kirk, Glover, Munoz, and Brian Harmon. So those are guys who struggle at the length of the par 5s that are here at Caves Valley. So with that being said, I'm going to come back to my custom stat model, and I'm going to adjust this a little bit. I'm definitely going to take out the proximities because it just wasn't a factor at the Northern Trust. I am going to bump up off the tee a little bit. We saw how important that was. I think this is going to be important. I do want to bump up the par 3s a little bit. Guys, if you have any ideas, jump in, chat. Let me know. I'm starting to. I don't know. Scrambling, I think, is going to be very important. Fairways is going to be very important. That's tied into the off the tee as well. Around the green, putting's going to probably be important. I want to see who avoids bogeys. Perhaps I should remove the bogey avoidance and the opportunities gained because we just don't know how easy or difficult this is going to play. There's certainly an argument to remove these. I definitely like seeing this, but I don't know if it should factor into the rankings. We saw that bogey avoidance was pretty darn good last week, but it's generally going to be good every week if you're at the top of the leaderboard. We saw that the par 4s and the par 4s of the length, the par 4s were great. The par 4s of the length were great. It was the proximities that weren't. So that gives me more reason to believe that hitting on these is important. Let's go ahead and take those two out. And we have what? So we have 10% to play with. Again, guys, if you're in chat, please let me know. What do you think? Or in the comments, if you're reading or if you're seeing this after live, in the comments, let me know. What do you think is going to play here at Caves Valley? Or what are you building or thinking about in your models? 10% to play with. I do want to see the par 3s because the majority of them come from there. I do want to split up these par 4s because 3 of them are drivable, 6 of them are from this length, so you could argue the 10 and the 5, but maybe around the green. It was so hit and miss last week at the Northern Trust. I just don't know where to put this 5%. Part of me just wants to put it in approach. Say, F it. Because I'm an iron style preferred player. Yeah, that just seems wrong. I'm going to put it in these just into the 450, 500 just because the more of the par 4s of these than there are these. Make sure no filters are on. Let's see what this spits out now. Because if you remember at the beginning of the show, Louis Oosthuizen was the number 1 when you factored in the bogeys and the birdie or the opportunities gained and proximities and such. This is just with these here having added a little bit off the tee, changing some of this around. Louis is still number 1. So it goes Louis, Harris English, John Rahm, Morikawa, and Answer, the top 5. Cantley, M, Scheffler, Matsuyama, and McNeely are the top 10. I agree. PY, that's Cam Smith more than Rory. That's just, that's got to factor in, recency bias. And I'm not sure if you were here for the bit why I was highlighting Rory so much. Take nothing away from Cam Smith. He played fantastic last week. But Rory did not have a Rory week. Bryson was okay. I don't know how Bryson's going to do this week. But Rory, again, just to highlight, generally Rory is great with his irons, great off the tee. Well, if you look at Rory last week, he was god awful with his irons. You have to go back all the way to February before he was losing strokes with his irons. So this was an absolute outlier. Absolute outlier. So I am back on the Rory bandwagon. His off the tee number was okay, a little bit lower than his normal. Certainly he putt better than he normally does, but this is what Rory does. He's a volatile putter. Great, terrible, pretty bad, pretty good, pretty bad, fantastic, god awful. So this is what Rory does. And if you get another week where he's like this and his irons come back to form, give me 35 to 1, and that's what I got him at, 35 to 1. So I'll take that all the time. Take it all the time. Let's see. Of course, there is no course breakdown because this is the first time this is been played, at least Caves Valley being played on the PGA Tour. We can look at the tournament history, but again, I don't put a lot of stock into this just because these aren't Caves Valley, so there's no... That's the reason why I was using the Northern Trust from last week, because Caves Valley and Northern Trust just look similar. They just look similar. The amount of water in play, although this week there's a little bit less water on Caves Valley than there was at Liberty National, but the speed of the greens, the acres of fairway. This is actually Caves Valley has almost double the amount of rough, but the rough is the same length as it was at Liberty National. The yardage is comparable. What's the winner going to shoot? I mean, that's if you can answer that question, you're going to get a big leg up because we simply don't know how tough this is going to be. The last time this was used in a competitive environment was the 2017 Seniors Players Championship. You can't take much off of that because the course then was 7,000 yards playing for seniors. Now it's 7,500 yards. If I had to take a guess at what the winning score would be, I think you're close with the minus 15. I'm going to say minus 18 only because I think it's going to play a tad bit easier than difficult. A lot of that being with the wind. We saw the wind is just, completely calm as of right now, 30 hours away from tee off. That could change in the next hour. That's how weather works. But I think it's going to trend to be easier than difficult. I could be way off. That's just a gut feeling of mine. It's just a gut feeling of mine. So, but I think it's going to play easier because guys are used to fast bent greens. This is exactly what they shot or what they had last week at Liberty National. It's the same basic yardage. Liberty National was a par 71, 7,400. This is a par 72, 7,500. So they just, it's essentially the same. It's just one more par 5 than a par 4. Same length of rough. Roughly the same amount of acreage of fairways. These are going to be harder to hit, I think. But, that's why I think it's going to be easier. I'm going to say minus 18. And that's just a guess. So let's kind of round this out by doing some DraftKings Sportsbook odds. And I'm going to keep my custom stat model here. Your huge favorite is John Rahm at 5.5 to 1. I understand why. Number one player in the world for a reason. I'm never going to bet somebody at 5.5 to 1. You're going to have to lay some serious wood to get what I think is value on 5.5 to 1. And I don't think John Rahm is that much better than the rest of the players in the field. I just don't. Because the second price on the board is 16-1. Xander and Spieth at 16-1. So I don't think John Rahm is worth 10.5, 11.5 points lower, more in favor of Spieth or Xander. Now, if I had to pick a winner, sure, it'd probably be Rahm over those three. But if you're going to give me odds of 10.5 more, I'll take Xander and Spieth. Colin Morikawa at 18, JT at 18. I like JT this week. A lot of things point to him. He's been high on the models. DJ 22, Bryson 22, Louis 22, and then a lot at 25. Well, Rory, Brooks, and Cantlay all at 25. That's a bit misleading because, again, as I've said through the show, I hammered Rory as soon as the odds came out. I got 35-1 on Rory. 25-1 is still fair. I would still take Rory at 25. I'm just happy I got him at 35. So those are your favorites, I would say, 25-1 or less. And then if you go into the quote second tier, or what I call the upper tier, you've got Cam Smith and Tony Finau at 28. Scheffler and Casey at 30. English, Answer, Hovland, and Berger at 35. I like Berger quite a bit at 35. Hideki and Webb at 40. Connors, Lowry at 45. Nothing there, screams fantastic value. I mean, I like Berger at 35. Casey at 30 is okay. Like I said, I hammered Rory at 35. Moving on down, I've mentioned Johnny Vegas a little bit. Vegas is, boy, I'm scrolling, 130-1. That's a bet I'm probably going to have to take. I think just like Rory in his last week, his irons were an aberration. Let's look at Johnny Vegas, if I can find him. I probably already passed him. There's Varner. Johnny Vegas. Yep, I apparently passed him. There he is, 16th in the model. Johnny Vegas is normally fantastic off the tee. Normally very, very good off the tee. His irons have been pretty good. He has always been a pretty bad putter, volatile with the putter, but pretty bad. He lost strokes off the tee. He never loses strokes off the tee. I can't say never, but it's very rare that he loses strokes off the tee. Yeah, exactly. He's been very, very good, and he lost strokes off the tee last week at the Northern Trust. I'm willing to bet, at least, especially at 130-1, that this is more like, this will be more of like a normal week for him. He actually goes back into the positive. Maybe he makes some putts because you see he's volatile. He lost 2.5. He gains 2.5. He gains 2. He gains 3. Now he certainly can shit the bed, lose 6.5. Again, he's just a volatile putter. So, if he goes back to his normal off the tee and has a good week with the putter, 131 is going to feel real good. Not guaranteeing that he wins, but 130-1 on Sunday looks pretty darn good. So I like Vegas. I like Berger. I've hammered Rory. So that is what I have for the Draftkings Sportsbook odds. We've run a little bit over on time. I would like to build a mixed model for you all, but I might have to start that tomorrow, start the DFS Tactics show with that. And I'll be fumbling around with it tomorrow to see where I'm kind of leaning. Again, just to give you an overview, if you are a Fantasy National member, I'm going to be looking at bent greens, fast bent greens. I'm going to be looking at long courses. I'm going to look at calm wind. I'll be looking at par 3, par 4 efficiencies of the lengths of the holes. So in the comments, guys, let me know what you're looking at, or maybe what something you might want to see in the mixed condition model you think would be a good idea. So with that, I think that's going to conclude the BMW Data Dive show. Hopefully there was some good nuggets of info for you all to get you prepared for Thursday and tomorrow as you prepare your DFS lineups. So with that being said, until tomorrow, may all your bets be profitable.